These Knipex mini water pump pliers have been super popular over the last few years. They're a pretty innovative design, but they're expensive. So of course, China came along and made their own version of these pliers for your everyday carry. And they're not bad. They're a quarter of the price. And that's what China's good at, making cheap rip-offs of innovative products. They're not innovating, they're imitating. But there's another country that's been doing this way longer than China ever has. And we're going to talk about that today. So my grandpa Melvin was a logging truck driver. He's passed away years ago now. Did his own work on his own machines as much as he could. And so I've been slowly trying to clear out this garage. And he was one of those guys that liked to have like 3 or 4 of everything. And there's a lot of cool old tools here, you know, made in the US, really neat stuff. But this guy just loved pipe wrenches for whatever reason. I keep finding these in every corner in here. And you know, a lot of his stuff was cool old like Craftsman stuff, made in the USA. And I remember going with Grandpa to Sears every time he'd break a wrench, and we'd turn the wrench in and get a new one. That's what he loved about Sears, because my grandpa's favorite thing was buying something cheap and being able to break it and return it. He was a thrifty man. Even though he'd own, you know, 4 of the exact same tool, he was a thrifty guy. He'd find a deal and he'd buy them out. That's just what his deal was. So when I was digging around out in the garage, I found some lineman's pliers, and that made me really excited because my great-grandfather was a lineman. He worked for Bell Systems. When he got home from the war, he was penniless. He had a wife waiting for him back home, and they had nothing. And Bell Systems gave him a job, and he was able to raise a family working for Bell Systems, and worked for them until they broke him up during the monopoly breaking of old Ma Bell. It's kind of cool to find lineman's pliers from the era he would have been using these pliers. These ones were probably made in the 60s, but when I was looking at them, I saw something that made me pause. So these pliers are marked Made in the USA by H. Boker and Company. And they look a whole lot like a set I already have. And that's these Klein lineman's pliers, made in the USA. Now the lineman's pliers might be a little bigger now because I think we have bigger hands than maybe folks did in the 50s and 60s. But what tipped me off here is this notch here, this milled notch on the face of these pliers. See how Klein has that? Klein's been sporting this milled notch for many years. Now, of course, Klein Tools invented the lineman's pliers. So I went out and grabbed a set of older Klein lineman's pliers. Look at this. Bell Systems. My great-grandfather could have used these. And this H. Boker US-made tool is a direct copy, I mean, in almost every way, of these Klein linemen's. The handles are almost the exact same sweep on them. They're certainly the same width. I haven't counted the serrations on the teeth, but cross-hatched serrations on the Klein, cross-hatched serrations on the Boker. And we know that Klein invented the lineman's pliers. I would assume that they were the first ones to put this notch in here. When I look at pictures of older Kleins, we see this notch appearing. H. Boker also has this notch. Boker was not innovating, they were imitating a Klein. Klein invented these, and other companies in the US came along and copied them almost note for note. I would challenge you, if we did not have any markings on them, to tell me which one is Klein and which one's the Boker. These ones are from the Utica company in New York. So I say Utica. Again, almost a note-for-note rip-off of the Klein design. We can assume probably that the Klein was the first one to come up with this sweep on this handle and everything. Maybe they weren't. Maybe Klein was copying these guys, but the point stands, all 3 of these tools, look at these, are virtually identical. So who was ripping off American designs? It was America. We've always been really good at ripping off each other. And rather than innovating, just imitating. And to make matters even more complicated, of course, we come to the modern era. Here's a really nice pair of snap-on slip joint needle nose pliers. These are a great tool. They were expensive. Made in the USA, you know this design was made in the USA. This is just a really neat, innovative tool, which an American company ripped off. Here's Icon, Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight's an American company. This tool is practically indistinguishable from the snap-on. There's a lot of videos about this. It's a note-for-note copy. I mean, everything about these is basically the same. An American company copying an American company and shipping production overseas to, where are these made? Taiwan, I believe, to copy the American product. Now, in reality, they probably sent one of these to China and had China make the tooling to create this product. If the tooling wasn't already made in China, because of course the US doesn't make tooling anymore, where did Snap-on get their tooling made? Perhaps that tooling was made in China, and China just copied the tooling to sell this design to Harbor Freight to have it made in Taiwan. It's an American company ripping off an American company, probably by using China. And of course, China then directly comes to the table. And although not making an exact clone of that product, this is pretty darn close. A slip joint needle nose plier. Maybe they didn't exactly understand the assignment because we're not getting the stretch on the nose out here like you get on these guys. But it's still a slip joint needle nose. China copying Taiwan, copying America. Yeah, probably. And then comes the next thing that I've noticed going on with tools, which is even more damning for America. So of course, Channel Lock invented the channel locks. These are a grooved slip joint plier. I've always hated this kind of tool. It was innovative in its time because you could have one tool and have multiple sizes for gripping stuff. It is a useful tool. Channel Lock invented these. And of course, American companies came along and just copied it. These are some older SK tools, SK Wayne. They patented these somehow, even though, I mean, look at the grooves on these. I don't know what you can patent about this that's not the same as this. But this is a US company, again, just directly ripping off another US company, but making the stuff in the USA. Then Germany came along and said, you know what, we could probably make that better. Here's a Knipex I bought from Matco Tools, a US company. But here's a Knipex water pump pliers. And these I vastly prefer to use over this. This you can maybe change the size one-handed, but this guy, I mean, this is just as easy as it gets. A little button on the side to change your size. Now, of course, China had to come along and copy it, right? Which they did. They did a pretty good job. Here's a button. They make bigger versions of these. Yep, they're just copying that design. Here comes Klein Tools, folks. American Klein Tools make it basically a ripoff of this Knipex Cobra. Look at the jaws. There's a different sweep to the handle. I do like the Klein. It's a little wider handle, so you feel like you better get a better grip. Same design. You got a button, bigger, chunkier teeth, okay? But what are they doing? They are copying the design of another country and making it themselves and shipping off production to where? Probably Taiwan. So there you have it. America ripping off every other country in the world and making copies of stuff and shipping it off to other countries to make it America's been the bad guy the whole time. Is that what's going on here? I don't know. I'm confused. Now, if we want to get really into the weeds, which I'm sure we do, SK Tools, venerable old SK Tools from Chicago, Illinois. Grandpa had some of those. These guys got bought out by Great Star, who started making stuff in China under the SK brand, but they still produce stuff in the United States. So a Chinese company who also owns like WorkPro, so Chinese stuff. A Chinese company bought an American company and still produces tools in America and in China, and they're buying them all out. They bought out Aero Tools, which is an older brand. I found some old Aero stuff around here the other day. So I don't even know what to make of that. Chinese company buying an American company, producing tools in America. Then, of course, companies like Hyundai and Toyota. Toyota for years has been making cars in America and making them better than Americans have. And in some cases, cheaper. Hyundai, for sure. You know, they're putting plants in the U.S. because they found it's less expensive for them to produce those things in the U.S. What are we doing, America? I just don't know what to think anymore.